If you are a frequent listener to the podcast, you know that we have been sponsored by Fuji Sports for quite some time now. Whether you're looking for apparel, equipment, bags, or accessories, Fuji Sports has got it covered. Go to fujisports.com to see the latest selection of everything you need for your jiu-jitsu, judo, or MMA journey. That's fujisports.com. Let me take a minute to tell you about RŌL TV. If you're looking to take your jiu-jitsu to the next level and supplement your BJJ education, then RŌL TV has you covered. RŌLAcademy.tv has over 1,500 videos covering individual techniques, positions, and concepts, including seminars and workshops with top-level competitors and instructors like Chris Wojcik, Robert Drysdale, Aaron Hurley, Emily Kwok, and more. Whether you are a beginner or a more advanced student, RŌL TV is the online platform that can take your jiu-jitsu to the next level. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. This helps us bring you the great guests and amazing content that you've come to expect. On this episode, Thomas and his guest discuss the importance of mindset, self-directed learning, and the challenges of continuous improvement in jiu-jitsu. They also take a deep dive into the importance of jiu-jitsu within the world of law enforcement. Here is the RŌL Radio with a second-degree black belt, IBJJF Nogi Pan American and American National Medalist at Adult and Master 1, and a man with 10 years in law enforcement who is a lead combatives instructor for the fastest growing combatives company in the country, Dylan Royce.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live. Dylan, welcome to the show. How are you? First of all, don't call me sir. That makes me feel like I'm 70. No, don't. No. I know. I completely understand. I completely understand, and I do appreciate this. But for we were chatting just a little bit before we started this, and how hot is it over there? Is it as insane as is over here? Yeah. Yeah, it's even this morning I got out of the house earlier to beat the heat and get to the academy so I can and I was here most of the day saying I'm not leaving until sun goes down. So but I feel like it's these hills and valleys when it comes to the weather. And well, you're on the East Coast, I'm in the Midwest, but it's very similar from that perspective. It's hills and valleys. Either it's freaking hot or it's snowing all the time, isn't it? Well, but we are not here to talk about weather. We probably lost all the listeners by now, and now we can really get to the conversation.
Sure.
But listen, I appreciate you being on the show, and I got really excited when we connected and when you agreed or when you accepted the invite to have this conversation with me, because you're one of those individuals who, one, appears to be extremely hardworking and extremely focused, and that's, I feel, very difficult in today's life. But also you're law enforcement representative, and you're definitely a black belt, and you've been on the mat for quite a bit. But also fitness has a very present role in your life. Between all of these, this creates a unique cat, in my opinion, a very unique personality, very unique person with very strong desires to achieve something that I would say, and tell me if I'm wrong, 99% people don't achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a very good assessment, and it is definitely something that a lot of people either don't achieve, or kind of to your point, as we see now that the sport becomes more popular and more prevalent, is that people can achieve certain results, but it's not reflective of the what we're striving for as black belts to be like very superior. A lot of times it can just be a title that's obtained, but if people don't have this type of focus and this drive to continue improving and reach their highest potential, then it can kind of water down that black belt and that previous you know look of the belt represent what it is supposed to represent, what it represented years ago when it wasn't.
And we'll get to your history in a moment, but how long has it been since you stepped on a mat as a number, as a years?
I think at this point, and it's funny because the longer it goes, like the more I lose track. It just feels like it's been my whole life. But
you got to think about it for a minute.
Yeah. I think it's probably close to 18 years. So
18 years, that's a long time.
More than half.
That's nearly 2 decades, right? And I had a similar conversation with somebody, and they made a very interesting comment. They made, first of all, Jiu-Jitsu is not the same today as it was before. But number two, the quality of what appears to be as a black belt is slightly different than what it was before. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, before the time frame that was generally associated with black belt was like, minimum 10 years of training, unless you were very superior and, you competed a lot and you put to it and you were like a savant of sorts and you could get it in, 7 years, 6, 5, whatever. Now, it was generally 10 years. And now with the availability of information, how quickly you can obtain the highest level of instruction and information that's out there and readily available from the best instructors, the best competitors, it's allowing people to reach very, obtain very quick results in the sport that before you weren't able to. So I think you're seeing people progress a lot quicker. You're seeing people get their black belts a lot quicker, and you're seeing black belts that if they take that route and they use all that information available and they compete, their technical superiority it's very impressive. It's not that there weren't black belts like that back in the day, but now it just seems like everybody's just so technical, so high level. So it's really keeping a high standard.
So do you feel that this is the fact of Jiu-Jitsu just evolving to be a much more technical, quote unquote, game, or is it the fact that it's so saturated and there is, I suppose the standards have been lowered a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think you're seeing, like, because the popularity of the sport is increasing, more people are getting involved. There's maybe more financial support for it. And so the amount of information that's available, the level of instruction, all those things can continue to rise if people take advantage of what is, what's out there and available for them. So, it's making the practitioners much more proficient. And if you want to be a good school, a good instructor, a good school with the amount of schools that are out there now, with how saturated it is, you have to keep up as well. So there's also a level of responsibility now for lifelong practitioners to continue evolving as well. Because if they're not, then it's going to be, it's going to be apparent. People are going to see that, hey, this guy, think about when we started and leg locks weren't very prevalent. And now that's people are learning leg locks by blue belt.
Yeah, I was about to say they learn leg locks before they learn an arm bar.
Exactly. And it's good and bad, right? Like, it's just that's just the way that the sport has shifted in recent years. But I think it'll rectify. It'll come full circle once leg locks are as common as they are, and once people are reaching a level of proficiency with them early on, they won't be quite as effective or dangerous because everybody will be used to that. Everybody will have the same level of training. It won't be some people have the superior knowledge of leg locks that others don't, and then now the people that have that knowledge are able to have a much higher level of success. If everybody's getting that same instruction at an early point, and everybody has the same quality of information, same capacity of information, then you'll see something else, some other meta of style of the sport start to take hold, and it'll kind of come full circle.
I had a Robert Drysdale on the show, and I believe he made this comment of it's almost like a waves of interest, if you will. It's way back in the 80s, half guard was a big thing, and nobody knew how to deal with it, and then deep half showed up, and then spider guard showed up, and De La Hiva showed up, and like people are freaking out about these things, and we are in this stage of leg locks, which I'm slowly starting noticing, and I'm curious what you think about this, that the whole wave of leg locks is kind of fading away very slowly. Like it becomes a norm, and like you might not be the person who prefers it, but you got to know how to address it, and we kind of moving away from that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's some merit to that statement. I think if you hear some of the people who originally had a lot of success with leg locks talk about it, people like Craig Jones, I've heard him speak before about, when he was part of the, Danaher Death Squad, and a lot of those guys were having the success they were having. It wasn't necessarily because their leg locks were that good. It was just that people didn't know how to, address or defend it. So they would get a lot of panic taps because guys would just get caught in these, not very proficient leg attacks, but their leg defense would be even less proficient, and they would just kind of panic and tap. And now you're seeing like a very standard traditional heel hook. People just barely even flinch anymore. They barely respect it. They're so used to countering it. So now you're seeing like if somebody's going to have success with the leg lock game, they have to have 5-6 different styles of leg lock attacks that they can string together and counter the person's defense and counters. And so like to Dean List or the Robert Dreisel's like point, it's just something that I think eventually, like once everybody has those same levels of attacks and levels of defense, it'll just be the norm. It'll be like throwing up an armbar or a triangle. As long as you respect it and you see it coming, you won't panic. It won't have quite the same effect that it has right now.
It's almost like the phrase that you can drown a puddle of water if you don't know how to swim, Like,
oh, for sure.
You have no idea what's happening. Anxiety kicks in, you panic, and you don't know what the limitations are. But that's similar with what we're experiencing essentially when it's the first time we step on a mat, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like we don't even have to talk about submission, but people really get high anxiety and panic when somebody sits on top of their chest, right?
Yeah. Or even just makes a grip. You see it all the time, like when you train in the gi and if people aren't adept at dealing with a high level guard player and clearing high level guards, they freak out once the person on bottom gets a grip. But once you get confident at dealing with different guards and undoing them and passing, the person on bottom having certain grips, it doesn't bother you anymore because that grip is only as effective as the overall system of guard they're playing. And if you can negate that and take it apart, then that grip becomes insufficient. Right?
Is that what jiu-jitsu is, essentially? Developing a certain level of numbness to certain risks and situations where you create this awareness point of this is a risk and this is to be disregarded, even though, yesterday I felt risky at this position.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I think that's something that, just an overall mindset or perspective that you can take from any position where your level of proficiency, comes down to your ability to just engage in those positions and to remain in those positions and have the thought process to deal with each subsequent adjustment or attack from your opponent that comes about without having to fully exit the position in order to avoid it. You can remain there. You can just take it apart. That's something that, mindset and statement that a couple high-level teammates, instructors that I train with have, is you're basically just deleting the person's guard or just deleting their attacks. You're not, disengaging the position and then trying to re-engage on your terms and always expecting the circumstances to be perfect. You're engaging, you're taking what they're giving you, and you're deleting it, and you're continuing to, progress your position.
It's like disruption of the process, right?
Yeah.
You just shut down what was about to happen essentially ahead of time, right? But that's you can relate to that quite a bit, right? Being in law enforcement and I'm not part of law enforcement. I have no idea. I have a lot of respect for you guys. I think you guys are nuts doing your jobs these days. That's a separate part of this conversation. But what I'm saying, isn't that developing the skill of first not overreacting and making logical and rational decisions under high performing stress where situation likely is completely out of your control?
Yeah, that's a very good analogy, a very good comparison to draw, is that you're using all that experience, all that training that you have, all that confidence, and you're using it to engage or put yourself into certain positions where any number of variables might come about, any number of threats, but instead of just completely disengaging the situation, you're able to remain in that position, keep improving your position, and delete those threats, whatever they may be, physical or mental or verbal. You're just using that confidence in your training, and you're using it to take the best available option to you.
What came for you first, law enforcement or jiu-jitsu?
Definitely jiu-jitsu. I didn't have plans of getting into law enforcement. It just kind of happened. I went to college for something completely different, but I started training jiu-jitsu when I was in high school, probably when I was about
and
16.
When I read, there was not much prior of sport experience. Jiu-jitsu was one of the first things that you did. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was. I mean, there were there were sports that I had tried to excel in. I just didn't have much success. So, jiu-jitsu was the first one that I felt like I really had some immediate success or proficiency. And once you have that kind of like that immediate response and success, it's much more motivating for you to continue. And I think that's why I got so engrossed in it and stuck with it for so long.
What other sports did you try?
Oh man, everything. Your typical, just all the little league stuff: basketball, baseball.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Like, hold on a second. You couldn't figure it out basketball, and you exhale in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture? Like, you picked the most complex thing in the world, and that's easy for you?
I think it's got to be something with my hand-eye coordination. The fact that jiu-jitsu, you can just kind of latch onto somebody and then figure it out, as opposed to always having to be, moving your feet, moving the ball, like paying attention to all these things that are kind of outside of your immediate control. Jiu-jitsu, you can just grab onto something, get a hold of your problem, and deal with it, right away, physically, like that.
Do you remember your very first day?
Yeah, I do actually. Like, as cliche as that would sound, I do remember, all the like anxiety that came with it, and
walk me through that day.
Yeah, so
walk me through the day. First of all, why jiu-jitsu, not something else? Like, how do you stumble upon jiu-jitsu? Why that?
Yeah, so I got into just the martial arts in general a little bit before jiu-jitsu. I had like some friends who, were kind of like me, where they didn't really have like a particular sport or something that they excelled in, and we all started doing taekwondo actually, and that was kind of the first step. And I think doing like a martial art like that, even if you don't immediately have success in it, even if you don't take to it right away, you've the kind of like overall aura of it, like the history, the tradition of it, the discipline, the respect, like it makes you like want to continue with it, want to succeed, want to do better. You feel like you're part of like a secret society, a secret club, So that was very, for something like taekwondo, that was something that made me want to be, part of it, have success. And once I got exposed to other martial arts after doing that, my cousin was one who exposed me to jiu-jitsu. He was like, "Hey, I'm training this right now. I know you're doing taekwondo, but this stuff's like legit. This is the much better route to take. This is the stuff you want to be doing." And this was back in like 2006, probably something like that, 2007. So jiu-jitsu had been around for quite some time, but it was not very mainstream, and so nobody really knew what it was other than the people that did it. And so I had no idea. I'd take his word for it. Went with him to the place that he was training at, and at that time there was not many gyms in the area. So this was like
what's your
drive.
What's your confidence level? So how long do you train taekwondo? How long do you have stand up? Right, because you're a teenager at that point, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
How long you training taekwondo?
I did it for several years or so.
Okay.
Enough to just again build like a baseline of confidence. Like
so I mean, you're not clueless what striking is. I mean, there's some, even though in a young age, like all that builds confidence, especially some of the traditional martial arts. That's the core of what they teach, right? So you go. Do you know what jiu-jitsu is? Like, just framing big picture here.
No, at the time I had no clue.
So you're clueless.
Yeah.
So you are a striker by nature. You going to jiu-jitsu. You don't know what jiu-jitsu is, and what's going through your mind?
You know what? I guess I think at the time I was lucky that I was kind of ignorant to the fact, like, to what it was. I didn't realize like how effective it was So in my head, I'm thinking, well, I'm pretty good at this other martial art. I'll be okay. Not realizing that like the differences of effectiveness between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Because Taekwondo, like even though you're building confidence and you're learning how to, how to do certain strikes and use your body, like it's not like boxing or kickboxing where the level of sparring is very like, if you're not proficient, you're going to realize it pretty quickly. Taekwondo, you can get by with suboptimal technique because it's a lot of just like forms. It's a lot of, you're hitting bags, hitting pads, targets. You're not doing like very hard, high level sparring where it's going to become apparent if you're not good. And so I was a little ignorant. I thought I was better than I was. And so going into jiu-jitsu, I probably felt like, okay, I know this is something foreign to me, but I'll be okay. I'll pick up on it. I'll learn.
So what's that first day like? You step on the mat and?
Yeah. So it was, it was like good and bad. I would say it was very enlightening in the sense that I was like, man, this stuff you really like, you can't just fake it. If you don't know what you're doing, it's going to become apparent. But I also, I think the way that they put me into it in the class, like the way that I was walked through, guided, helped. It wasn't like I was just thrown to the wolves and expected to. Yeah, exactly. Like, so I knew it was very effective. I could tell the difference between that and Taekwondo, but I wasn't like deterred at all. They made me feel like, hey, this is something you could really be good at, and so it was, it was good and bad in that regard.
So the first class ends, and what's your immediate response in your mind? I mean, clearly there's an impact that's being made, but are you quitting Taekwondo? Are you sticking with Jiu-Jitsu? Are you what's going through your mind then?
You know what? I knew I was going to stick with Jiu-Jitsu. I don't think I quit Taekwondo yet at that time. I think I just knew like, hey, this Jiu-Jitsu stuff, like I really enjoyed that, and I know I could be good at it if I stick with it. So I know I'm going to stick with it. And I probably just felt like, all right, I'll balance the two. And then it wasn't until I realized like, hey, it's hard to balance two different martial arts like that are in completely different locations around the same time of day or night. You got to prioritize one. And that's when, I started to make that shift and say, look, all these guys that I'm seeing in jiu-jitsu, like they just seem much more proficient in their skill set, in their confidence, in their sparring. Like there's something to be said for that. There's clearly a difference between that and the atmosphere of the guys in Taekwondo. You could just tell that at Taekwondo the guys were, it was a little bit more like pomp and circumstance than it was actual like action on the mats. It wasn't always reflective of their skill set.
Was that a difficult decision for you?
No, I don't think so. I think I just, I was probably so relieved to just have found something that kind of clicked and resonated with me and felt like, hey, this is something that I can do for a long period of time and be confident in, have success in, continue to develop myself, continue to grow. It was very motivating to have found it.
So you are 16, right? Am I correct? You were 16, around 16 around that time?
Yeah.
And you really have these thoughts. I'm trying to dig deeper here. Like you say things, I can do this for a long time. This is what will allow me to grow. Does 16-year-old really think in those directions? Is that what's on the forefront of your mind? And like this is what my future could be?
Maybe not like future, but I think just that mindset of having found something that like had some staying power, right? Because a lot of the other sports prior to that, didn't have that. They were all just like, you get into doing a lot of those prototypical scholastic sports like baseball, basketball, whatever, just because you feel obligated to, right? They're like your typical school sports. Like you're going to have to do one of them. You're going to have to try them out. Like everybody does it. But if you don't have success with it, you don't, there's no staying power. It just feels like I'm just doing this as a requirement, as an obligation. Whereas jiu-jitsu was an elective, right? It was something that I was electing to do. And I
wanted to do it.
Yeah, I wanted to do it for my own reasons because I enjoyed it, because it was, I was motivated to do it, wanted to get better. And again, it had that like, you felt like you're part of a secret club, like at the time, I think I was the only person, had to have been the only person in my high school that was training jiu-jitsu. So you feel like even if you're just a white belt, you're doing something different. Like you're unique. You're doing something that nobody else in your school has even heard of or let alone doing.
What do your friends say about this?
You know what? I think at the time they were probably it was probably something that was really hard to like, get them to understand. Because I think at the time people were probably just starting to watch and get into like UFC more at that age, and so you're trying to get them to understand like, hey, look, this is the stuff that those guys that are fighting, on TV are doing on the ground. That's what I'm doing, and they, until it becomes more popular or until people do it themselves, they don't really understand like what the allure is, right? What the attractiveness is. They just see, people rolling around on the ground, and it's hard for somebody to grasp why that's so impactful unless they do it themselves, right?
Do you feel that that's how it is even today? Like, you've been on the mat for 18 years. You're law enforcement. I mean, Jiu-Jitsu is one of the probably main components of your life, not only from health or mindset perspective, but from safety perspective. Like, it's almost a requirement for your job, right? Do people around you who are not in that field understand what you do, what Jiu-Jitsu is?
Probably not. Again, I think like it's different for every person. It's different. It's based on their level of understanding of it, their comprehension of it, and then what type of role it would play in their life, right? Somebody that doesn't have any need to learn jiu-jitsu or any desire to learn it, they don't comprehend or understand why it's as effective as it is, why it's so impactful from, like you said, not just a physical standpoint, but a mental standpoint, an emotional standpoint. But even people in fields like law enforcement that do have a need for it, if they are not exposed to it, a lot of the time they're still a little bit clueless. They're still in the dark as far as just how beneficial it can be for them in their profession, just how beneficial it can be for them in their personal lives, from a mental standpoint. So
how is that even possible? And like, as an instructor, having academy and having dozens of police officers, here training with us, I often scratch my head. Like, I listen to their stories and they tell me about their, daily activities or struggles or things that they work on. And sometimes I sit back and scratch my head and I was like, how is it possible? How is this even like realistic that 90% of your officers they don't even know, they don't want to, or even if they do, they have no desire to even dip into. I'm not talking about training 6 times a week and being world champion. Forget about that.
Right.
I'm talking just freaking show up twice a week and freaking learn how balance works so you don't trip over your own feet. Like, how is this even possible?
I think to answer your question, what my assessment of it would be is that you have a system, in law enforcement that has overall, not this is in every department, but overall law enforcement has kind of neglected the need, the necessity for adequate training when it comes to, controlling another person or just dealing with another person. You have these officers that have gone, years, decades of being police officers, of training, of having gone through academy, whatever, and they're never taught or expected to have adequate knowledge of things like that. And so that mindset, all of a sudden having somebody, tell you how useful this is, how beneficial it is, how you need to have it for the job, it's hard for them to wrap their heads around, right? Because that's, law enforcement's mindset for years has been antiquated and has not, prioritized that. So it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. And unfortunately, a lot of, departments, administrations aren't taking that initiative to realize that, hey, even though it has been this way for years, that doesn't mean that it was the right way. We were missing something, right? We were missing out on this training, this knowledge, and how beneficial it could be. And so instead of realizing that and adding it in and making it mandatory and getting officers the training they need, they just keep doing it the same way they've always done, right?
Well, so I understand the fact of rules, regulations, and procedures, like, whatever. The department is not doing this, whatever. It comes from the top. I get that. But there is a second component of all this, is as an individual. Just because my job does not provide tools and the training does not mean that I shouldn't step up and protect myself, right? Because we talk about two different things now: requirements and a willingness to perform,
Mm-hmm.
right? So why all these guys just don't want to take care of themselves? I don't like. That's very difficult for me to process.
Yeah, I think it's obviously for every person it's different, right? We'd have to delve into like the individual mindsets and things like that. But I would say from having taught a large number of officers across the country and having seen the disparity in training, like some guy getting some students, some officers that are also black belts that have been training a long time, that train a lot and understand the need, and then having people that have never done any training, that are not just untrained from a combative standpoint, from a hands-on standpoint, but just aren't even in great shape. I think for some of them it's just that they're either in denial of it, they don't realize the necessity, the need for it, or they do realize it and they keep putting it off. They're just, something is holding them back, whether it's ego, whether it's time, something like that.
But aren't these all excuses?
There are excuses for sure. Yeah.
Like you don't see a plumber who's not certified.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I don't know. Would you allow contractor to build your house who's never built a house?
So that's a good point. That's the way I always phrase it, because I understand that it's hard for certain guys. If let's say you've been an officer for like 10 years, 12 years, you have a family, you have wife, kids, you have other hobbies and stuff, and then now all of a sudden, people are telling you in your spare time, not even on duty, in your spare time, you have to also fit in now training. I understand that the hesitation for people to try to fit that in, to want to do it. But to your point, I think that's the best analogy. That's the best thing, is to say your job is primarily predicated on, dealing with individuals that you're going to have to control, that you're going to have to, subdue to an extent, right? And you're doing it with absolutely zero knowledge or training. So that's like the same thing. You like you said, you could take any other profession. That's like expecting a doctor to administer medication, and they've never picked up a tool like that before. They've never used a syringe. They've never done anything like that.
That would be interesting,
right? Yeah, but that makes it sound even more asinine, doesn't it?
Right. No, yeah. I know. This is what I'm saying. Like, sometimes I scratch my head listening to the guys, there's like half a dozen police officers on the mat, and I'm like scratching my head listening to the story. It's like, I mean, this is nuts. I mean, good for you. My head goes off to you. You hear, and like, you're doing something about this. Where's the rest of your department?
I think a lot of the guys that don't train, they get a lot of false positives, right? Like you go through your daily operations of being a police officer, and you don't have any issues, right? You don't have anybody trying to fight you, or any, even if you get people that are somewhat resistant or combative, you're able to use your other tools and gain compliance. And it's kind of a false positive, right? Because that person is eventually becoming compliant for you, and you're thinking you did what you needed to do. You got the situation under control. But realistically, it's because the person decided to let you, right? Whether it was because they thought a threat of a taser or your firearm or something didn't warrant them, becoming more combative and fighting you. They eventually just decided, hey, I'm gonna go into custody. Let this guy take custody. But if you actually have somebody that is dead set on not letting you do that, and you have to actually deal with them hands-on, physically restrain them, deal with somebody combative, that's when it becomes very eye-opening that, hey, you don't know what you're doing, and you're not able to deal with this person with just your own hands and body. And that's when officers become very tool reliant, and that's not a good thing to have, because tools can fail. And the one thing that can't fail is your own knowledge. Like it can fail, but you can always build more of it. You can always improve it.
Well, it's not only. I feel like it's not only the skill of combat, getting your hands on people, or manipulating physically the situation, but I feel like the mental approach to all of this, de-escalate the situation, stay calm, make rational decisions, assess the situation. I mean, this is what jiu-jitsu essentially is, right? I mean, we just don't use tools to the same extent. Well, there are deadly weapons on the mat every single day. I mean, how many times you put your life in the hands of your partner?
Sure.
I mean, every single time you step on the mat, right?
Yeah.
So making rational decisions while blood flow to your head is limited or your arm is fully hyperextended, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah, just being able to, right, like go to practice like that, deal with somebody that is, even though it's in a training situation, their goal in that training period is to,
Compromise
to
you.
dominate you physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to be able to not only negate that, but you have to negate that under a lot of physiological responses, right? All that anxiety, all that stress, pressure, panic, and what it does to your body. You have to maintain the right frame of mind to deal with it, to stop that, your opponent's goals, and then to obtain your own. That's where I think, training, to your point, in jiu-jitsu, just on the mat for a police officer is so beneficial, because you don't, like you said, you don't need to train 5, 6, 7 days a week to become a black belt world champion. But you need to put yourself in a situation where somebody has a hold of you. Their goal is to do one thing, and your goal is to do another. And now you have to work toward obtaining your goal, despite all those physiological responses and disadvantages, right?
Yeah, that's the hard part, I guess. Showing up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know who said it, but somebody said it, and you might have heard it. But jiu-jitsu is like the only activity in life where you show up with a smile on the face, you get choked out, you leave with a smile on the face, and you paid for all of it, and you do it again next day.
Yeah. Oh, I can't. You know what? I can't tell you how many times, like, we have at the one gym that I train at, that I got my black belt from. There's a sign, that we have basically leading up the stairs. It says, there's nothing a good roll can't cure. And because how many times have you gone in stressed about one thing or another in life, and as soon as you step on the mat and you start training, like an hour passes, hour and a half passes, and you realize you haven't thought about that other thing, at all, and your frame of mind, your emotions are much better. It's an impressive way to deal with a lot of external stress and things in your life, is to just come in and train and just get that blood flow going, get that thought process going of your goal at that time, just to train and improve and have a good time. And I've never regretted going into a training session. There's been plenty of times where I'm tired, hurt, sore, just burn out from training, whatever, and didn't want to go train. And every time I've gone, I've been like, man, I'm so glad I did that.
Well, it's almost necessity to turn it off, in a sense, isn't it? I mean, how else can you process what is happening around you while your partner's trying to compromise you and get on top of you? And are you able to? Are you personally? Are you able to, rationalize different decisions or processes that are happening, in the outside world while you are trying to do jiu-jitsu?
No, I would say no. I have such a, but part of that's also because I'm just so passionate about jiu-jitsu that once I get in, and I start training, that's my only focus. Sometimes to a detriment, right? There's probably other times that I'm using it as an escape from things I should be doing, but I just love training so much, and I love improving so much that I just want to get in and have that experience and that frame of mind, that mindset, and what comes with it. So it's hard to focus on both, like you said, and that can be a gift and a curse. Is how you can use jiu-jitsu for an escape, but if you're using it as an escape for the right reasons, right, and to improve yourself physically and mentally, and just forget about those stressors, then I think there's no better cure in the world, right?
I could not agree more. Yeah, 25 years for me, still going, so I can't live without it. So
yeah, exactly. Clearly, it plays a huge part of your life, huge impact, and you're using it, for other means, right? Using it for a way to develop the radio station and the podcast, to reach out and communicate, connect, and get people's stories out there, and that's starts with jiu-jitsu.
It all does, yeah.
But there's also times, man, I'm sure you've been there, where you get to a level where you have expectations of doing well, right? Your skill set is to a point now where when you train, you expect to do well. You expect to put out a certain level of proficiency, and if you have a hard training session where that doesn't come to fruition, man, that drive home at night, no music, no radio, just driving in silence, thinking about your performance, man. That's we've all been there. But
how do you deal with that? Because I think we all go through this, and some more than others, and some are harsher on themselves than others. Some
Yeah.
don't even care about their performance, and humans are humans. Will do whatever people will do. What people will do. But how do you deal with this? How do you deal with bad performance? Maybe first let's define what bad performance means to you. I mean, is that just having a sucky day attitude wise, or are you physically depleted, or I don't know,
Yeah.
somebody who is much less experienced caught you in something surprising? I mean, what do you define as a bad day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's different levels to it, right? There's like you could make it just a very general macro statement that you had a bad performance or bad experience or whatever, but um there should be different levels of it, and there should be different ways that you can benefit from it and examine, what exactly caused you to perform the way you did and what you can do to benefit from it and overcome it, right? Like again, sometimes you're going to be overworked, you're going to be tired, you're not going to be as motivated, and you still show up, but your performance is lacking, right? And so if you have a bad training session, you get tapped, you get passed, you get swept, whatever. I think you still need to realize that, like, hey, your goal of showing up that day wasn't necessarily to win every match. You knew going into it that you were deficient, that um, you weren't going to be performing at your highest standard because of all those other factors. But your goal was to show up and to just get better. So if you did something, anything that got better, whether it was during the drilling portion prior to rolling, you fixed a particular technique or you learned a new technique, then that was a successful training session, right? Regardless of the outcome of the actual roll. So for me, I try to look at it like, I don't like losing as much as anybody else, but I understand that, like, it's a necessity, right? In order to get better, you're going to have people that are holding you to a high standard that are also high level, and you have to respect it. Like, they want to do the same things. They want to win every match, and they want to use the techniques they have to overcome your techniques. So it should just be a way to keep gathering data about yourself. Where do you need to improve? What are you doing well? What needs to be better? And then just learning from it. So, bad experience is a very subjective term, right? One person's bad experience could be, there's probably people that would kill to have your bad experience, right? They would kill to be at
Well,
your level.
yeah, and this is the interesting part about life, not necessarily jiu-jitsu, but just life. I feel like sometimes, or even I would say oftentimes, our brains just spiral in this negativity.
Yeah.
It's like if we look at this, I had a bad training session, but like we spin this the opposite side. Like, did you show up? Yep. Other people can show up. That's not so bad, right? You woke
Mm-hmm.
up this morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a job, you have a family, you have a house. That's not so bad, right? Just because things didn't go according to plan here or there. Like, we can always look at this glass half full, half empty,
Yeah.
right? And do you feel like that there is room in our life to be negative in that sense, or should we really be positive most of the time?
I think, to your point, like, I used to think it was cliche to continuously um, give yourself those positive affirmations or positive mindsets. You'd hear people preach that all the time, and it's like, yeah, that's easy to say and do, but is it really? How much effective does it really have? But when you really do it, and when you contrast it with the opposite, when you contrast it with not doing that, and
Hmm.
filling your mind with negative thoughts and feelings, like the impact of positive affirmations, it's astounding. Like, your mind is such a powerful tool, that it's really gonna um, grow, and you're gonna be able to nurture it yourself with those positive things. And again, like, it's natural, right, for us to have um, these negative thoughts, these negative reactions to certain stimulus in our lives or in training, whatever. But it's all about how you use it. I mean, there's at this point, I can't even count how many times I've lost in competition. Like, it is what it is, right? If you compete at a high level, you're gonna lose. I mean, it's the best people in the world all have losses on their record, right? Tynan Dalper is one of the best guys in the world right now
Hmm.
in my weight class, right, in the middleweight division, and even for as astounding of a record as he has some blemishes, but he used those blemishes, those losses, to come back, to reformulate his game, to win worlds subsequent years. So it's all about what you do with it. I think having a negative thought is not a bad thing, right? It's unavoidable, but it's all about how you utilize it, what you do with it, how you benefit from it, and that's really where you have to, do a lot of like mind training and research, and find those ways to deal with it and overcome it, because that's going to be the difference between your success at the highest level, right? All these guys are strong, they're all athletic, they all have good games, they've all been training for decades, right? They're all great on top, they're all great on bottom. It's a lot of it comes down to mindset. There's really it's such a big differentiator.
It truly is. As I was listening to you, I remember my dad when I was little. Can always repeat to me, and when I was upset, when I was angry, he always told me, you have 5 minutes to bitch and whine. After that, all I want to hear is how you're gonna fix it.
Yeah.
And it's just for years, and it annoyed the shit out of me. I was like, you are so annoying.
Yeah.
I don't want to. You know what? It's like one of those things that your parent does over and over and over. But look, 40-some years later, and I still remember that. And anytime I say it back to him, he laughs at it now, and it's like, it's like, but there is something to it, right?
No, you're 100% right. For me, the same thing that you just vocalized there, I can point to that with my relationship with my mom. She's such a stoic that any hardship in life she can just deal with, because she always maintains that same mentality and that same thought process that life will go on, the sun's still going to rise the next day, the world's still going to rotate, right? It like, just because you had a bad event or a bad day or whatever, life doesn't stop, the world doesn't stop rotating. So it's all about how you're going to react to it, what you're going to do about it. But when you're a kid and you hear that, you're like, you don't want to hear it. You're like, how does this stoic mindset benefit me? I just need to be. I need you want the person to disagree with you and tell you how you're right. Everything's so shitty. That shouldn't have happened to you. But the older you get, like you said, you realize the merit in it, and it helps you so much once you can draw from those actual life experiences where that mindset helped you.
Yeah, for sure. Life lessons. So besides being a police officer, I just learned right before we got on that you have an opportunity to teach and train police officers, and that's in addition to being an instructor, Jiu-Jitsu instructor. I'm actually curious to pick your brain on this a little bit. I feel like, and we may laugh a little bit, couple laughs before we started, that it feels like the moment we gain a little bit knowledge, like second week, we want to share everything, you want to share everything. But these milestones, we get a blue belt, and now we are better than the white belts, and we want to share more. And the purple belts now, we are inverting.
The purple belt, you can finally skip warm-ups. And
I know, so you skip warm-ups, and you're inverting, you're flying, you're doing crazy things, it's like, it's cool stuff, right? But we go through these milestones, but at each of them, there is this need to share things, share what we've experienced, share our knowledge. And I think humans in general are very, very easy to converse and share with their experiences, especially positive ones. How important is it to gain certain expertise before we start expressing or teaching somebody?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up and you say that, because I have this conversation with people, all the time. I didn't used to be an instructor at all, or a good one. My goal for the longest time, I like to show up. I like to train hard, get a bunch of rounds in, sweat, and then just get off the mat, right? I like to it's sweat equity. I like to get hard training in. I like to compete, and that was it. I wasn't very cerebral in my approach to the sport and to like understanding, even if I was having success on the mat, why was I having success? What was allowing me to build the skill set that I did, that was that I could use to overcome other people? And it wasn't until I kind of hit like a plateau with my competing, and had some losses or even some wins where even if I was winning, I didn't feel like I was executing at the level that I was supposed to. That made me kind of go back and reevaluate my training and try to get over that hump. And one thing that I had to do is become much more cerebral with my approach to studying, breaking down, film, instructional, dissecting my roles to understand, what was I doing well, Why was it working the way that it was working? Just so that I could comprehend everything more. And once I started doing that, I said, you know what, like this is a good way for me to teach, because I can help people avoid those same pitfalls, right? I can help people reach this level, but quicker than I did. You know, I can help them realize what it is they're doing well, how to key in on that, and then if there's something that they're not doing well, what they can do to fix it, because I might have had the same problem. So I started teaching more. I started using that experience, and anything that I was studying, that was a way for me to teach it and ingrain it in my head more. So I learned a lot about myself as an instructor. I improved a lot, and I found that I was pretty good at it, and I was able to help a lot of people by doing it. I was getting a lot of positive feedback. So I started to do it more and more, and I think that, you know, the more I did it, the more I realized that not everybody, you know, thinks that way. Some people just teach because they know they're better than the people they're teaching, but they're not reaching their own highest you know, capacities, right? And so somebody who has no training or expertise is not going to realize the difference between those two types of instruction. It's like being like a starving man and you go to a restaurant. You're not going to care if it's a McDonald's, right? Or if it's a 5-star, you know, Michelin restaurant, James Beard award-winning restaurant. Like you need food, you need sustenance. For somebody that has no jiu-jitsu, no training, they can go to any gym. They know that the instructor knows more than they do, and they're just going to take what they get, and they're going to be a sponge, and they're going to retain it. Ultimately, I think if you want to stay in the sport for a long time and you want to keep reaching your own personal milestone, you know, you have to examine your instructor, your school. Are they continuing to improve themselves? Are they reaching those highest levels? Because if not, you're eventually going to surpass them. Or even if you don't surpass them, there's plenty of knowledge that you're not getting, that's being left on the table because your instructor never bothered to gain that information himself. So I think kind of having experience with pitfalls myself, having that wherewithal and that knowledge, it makes me keep working hard to be a better instructor and put out the best product that I can. And then I think, you know, my students benefit from it as a result.
Well, that should be the goal for all of us, right? To continue getting better, right? To continue studying and evolving, as individuals, right?
But it's not easy, right? Like it's easy to show up and train. That's the easiest part. We all, if you've been doing this sport for, you know, long enough that you're a black belt or you're an instructor or academy owner, like you probably like training. Like that part's not hard. It's hard to get done and then to go study, to research new positions that you're not good at, and jump into something that you're uncomfortable in, right? And to learn and improve on it. Like that's, the longer you train, that gets hard because a lot of people have egos in the sport and they don't want to start over anew. They don't want to work. Like, let's say you're somebody that's never done leg locks. Like we said, you know, these instructors who train for decades without ever having to do leg locks. And people start doing leg locks and it exposed a lot of their deficiencies, right? Some people, that's a silver lining. It's like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to really improve this position. I've realized I'm not as proficient as I should be. But other people don't take advantage of that. They continue to not teach it, and then their students suffer as a result. Their students don't learn it because their instructor's not bothering to learn it. Their instructor's just avoiding it because they're not good at it, and it just waters down the overall product. So I think you really have to be, as an instructor, you know, you have to never stop striving to improve yourself, because, you know, your students are an extension of you, and and just because you train for a long time and you're content with your knowledge, you know, they might not be. They deserve, you know, you to be doing the most that you can to learn as much as possible to transfer down.
Is there a similar case in law enforcement as far as continuous education?
Man, even worse.
Is it?
Because at least with jiu-jitsu, like we said, you have instructors who did train for a long enough period of time that they're adequate to be teaching, right? Like, even if they're not at the forefront of cutting edge moves and studying, they've still been training for, you know, at least 10 years, sometimes 15, 20, whatever. They're qualified to teach beginners, advanced, you know, students. It's law enforcement. There's none of that. And a lot of times, at least from the combative standpoint, right? From the things we were talking about, the defensive tactics, a lot of the instructors have zero training themselves. They just get picked because maybe they're the only ones that applied to do it, or they're in shape, the officers that look the part, you know, even though they have no hands-on training or knowledge. And so now you have somebody that isn't striving to learn this stuff themselves, but they don't even have any training to fall back on. They don't have any years of experience where they were teaching it and training it and doing it, and they just kind of got lazy and didn't keep evolving. They don't have any of that.
Why there isn't somebody who comes up with this stuff and say, well, listen, let's just design something here. Let's create a small company who benefits this. I don't know, maybe people are.
Yeah,
I mean, I suppose I can answer my own question. I mean, there are combatives programs,
yeah.
and it's slowly being chipped away. But again, like this is where my mind is exploding. Is like I feel like this is not such a big problem. Has a big volume of people, but the problem is pretty simple.
Yeah, exactly. That's, to a lot of people, it is just as mind blowing because the problem is so simple. It's just that we need a more thorough curriculum that's mandated by the state or by at the state level, that's mandated for every agency to teach and to learn. It's just the problem is it's gone on so long without that now there's so much kind of legal tape to jump through. There's so much
habits.
Yeah, bad habits to break and just and everybody's worried about liabilities, right? Like no department wants to have officers getting injured or hurt, so they shy away from training, not realizing that you're prolonging the inevitable. If you don't want somebody getting hurt during training, they're going to get hurt on the street. And I realize
it's almost like an oxymoron.
It's exactly
it's like
100% is what it is.
I mean, yeah.
So we, one thing that's fortunate about the combatives company that I, work full time for, Effective Fitness Combatives, is, we're not just teaching the combatives curriculum, but we're trying to change, the culture, the mindset of law enforcement thing, and we're not teaching the curriculum just as a way to check a box and to certify these guys to be able to go do their job. We're doing it because we want them to understand the importance of it. We want them to get involved in it, to benefit from it physically and mentally, and to change the culture so that we don't have these problems going forward, so that these things can be rectified. It's gone unchecked for so long, but the more that you train these officers appropriately in combatives right now, years down the line, those officers, once they're in charge and they can set a new precedence, they will understand the importance of this, and it won't be something that we'll run into years down the line. Once that culture has shifted.
Yeah, we do need that change. We definitely do need a change.
Yeah, and it's coming, man. Like the amount of since I started teaching for that company compared to now, we teach. We've taught international courses, so it's not just domestically in the United States here that we're teaching. We have agencies in other countries that are using our curriculum, that are seeing the techniques that we're doing posted on social media, and they're integrating it into their training, and then they're requesting us to come out and teach their officers. And I used to teach courses where there'd be maybe one guy in the course that trained jiu-jitsu in any capacity, and now we're teaching courses where 50% of the class trains. You might teach a class where I taught one in my hometown area like a couple months ago that we had not just half the class that trained, but we had several black belts in the class attending the class training. So it's definitely, the culture is definitely changing, it's definitely shifting. People are training more, realizing the importance of it. There's just a lot of years of malpractice when it comes to teaching and combative training and law enforcement that we got to overcome.
There's like a huge vessel that it takes a very long time to steer.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like, it's like a vessel that's got a lot of holes in the ship, causing it to sink, and people are trying to plug every hole at once, and what I mean, instead of just patching up one and fixing that one that's in your control, So, but it really makes you scratch your head at the way that some of the mindset thinking is, and we can't control that. We can only control what's in our own, what's right in front of us. And luckily for the combatives company that I work for, they're at the forefront of making that change, and they're using everything in their power to get these courses out there, to get officers the training that they need, and that's what's in our control, and that's what we're doing, and guys are benefiting from it, and it's changing the culture, and that's the most important part.
Well, good for you. You're doing good things. You guys do good things. I think we do need those changes, and I think I agree with you. I think more we talk about this, more the exposure from all kinds of levels, more awareness is being built, just like any other topic. I think more attention it will get, and that will lead with more people and so on. So I mean, good for you. You're good and doing good things.
Yeah, and social media is an important part of that too, because for good and bad reasons, like we're able to put out a lot of our own content, and so that cops are able to see it and get exposed to it and want to learn it and reach out to us. But there's also a lot of videos that are getting put out of law enforcement interactions, use of force interactions that go wrong, and it's exposing the lack of training, right? And nobody wants to be exposed and put on social media and end up there for doing something wrong. And so it's that should be a motivating factor for guys and girls to want to get the right training in, so that they're not, you don't end up on social media, you don't end up in court because of a poor use of force. Also,
it's just like we talked about earlier, it comes from two ends, right? It comes from the policy and from the top, but then also there is a certain responsibility for the individual to take things in their own action and being responsible for what they do and what they know, essentially, how they grow. The continuous education is humongous, I think, for anybody, but for you guys in law enforcement particularly.
Yeah.
Dylan, we talked about a lot of things. I mean, we talked about hard work. We talked about, your professional life, your jiu-jitsu life. We talked about struggles. I can't stop thinking and kind of keep coming back to the fact that people quit. We give up as humans. More I read, more I just engage in conversations, more I learn that we are actually very weak-minded creatures. Like small obstacles, and people just quit.
Yeah,
they quit, and then we give the laundry list of reasonings why things are hard and all the other things, and things are hard. But I'm curious from you, from somebody who has a very strong work ethic and professionally and on the mat, why is it so difficult to have this driven, goal-oriented mindset as what you've described from a very young age?
Yeah, I think some people are lucky to have something like that instilled in their mindset from a very early age. And if you are, then your body kind of adapts to it without maybe subconsciously, right? Without you having to actively think about it. You're always used to working hard toward a goal. You've always been motivated. If you're not, I think it can be hard to instill that mindset or that thought process, because it is very difficult, right? It's very difficult to continuously grow in any in any facet of life, in any profession or hobby or goal. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of persistence. It's very easy to not only quit, but to get distracted by things that are going to deter you from your goal. And it takes a lot of, like, you really have to be honest with yourself. You got to do a lot of criticism about yourself, figure out things you do right, things you do wrong, what you need to improve on, in order to stay persistent, reach those goals. And it's hard, like you said. A lot of people. I was just reading a book the other day called Think and Grow Rich, and the book is rooted in financial aspects, but really it pertains to any endeavor. And that's one thing that they mention is, like you said, so many people, so many entrepreneurs, whatever it is, fail because they come up with these ideas. They're thinking about so many different things, and they don't follow through on it. They don't have the persistence. They shy away at the first sign of failure. And I think that if you really want something, you have to really look deep inside. You have to examine yourself, see what you do right, see what you do wrong. Map out the best course of action that's going to help you reach those goals. And people just don't want to do that. We're in a society, right, where we expect immediate reward, immediate gratification, right? Like, it's so easy to just get a dopamine fix from social media. And when in the real world, the real world doesn't do that for you. The real world's not going to give you a dopamine kick every time you step out the door, right? You got to go searching for it, and you got to work hard for it. But if you're addicted to that, if you have that addictive personality where you're addicted to growth and progress, then that's, not getting that fixed right away isn't going to deter you. You're going to keep searching for the ways to reach that growth, because you have the right mindset, because you're addicted to it.
Do you think that we can change that in a sense? We can adapt to the growth mindset. You're describing growth mindset and a fixed mindset, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we are capable of adapting and changing the way how we look at life, look at what's around us?
I hope so, because we're, intelligent creatures. All the strides that humanity has made to improve our quality of life, our education, the amount of information that's out there and is readily available and accessed. Like, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to do that, right? But unfortunately, there's that information. It's a double-edged sword. You think of something like Google, right? How powerful, like, the World Wide Web is as a search engine. You could search. I mean, you could look up how to do anything, right? How to learn another language, how to fix a house. Like, you could use that tool in so many beneficial ways, right? But you could also just spend your time looking at a lot of dumb shit and wasting your time, so it's all about what you use it for, right? It all starts with the mindset of the user and what they're trying to use that for. And unfortunately, there's probably ways that we can curate those things to be used for positivity, for beneficial things, but that's not always what makes money. And the companies that are in charge of these things, that really have control over them, want to make money. And so sometimes they have to let people just be masters of their own fate. And if that means that they're going to waste their hours using technology for something that's not productive, that's on them. So I think all we can just do is try to keep fostering the right mindset for people, to keep striving to improve and to grow and move forward, and use all the information, everything that's out there that's readily available. Use it for something positive, use it to improve. But it all starts with the individual mindset, right?
Well, we see a lot of that in Jiu-Jitsu, particularly in the last couple of decades. I mean, the oversaturation of social media and video, it is. I mean, it's a great thing, but at the same time, how many students of yours come in with their phones and say, "Hey, how do I do this?" And they see a 7-second clip,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's again, it's like the good and bad at the same time, and having that balance. And I think that's the key word here that we are trying to emphasize, is that balance. Everything is good in moderation.
Yeah.
Once we sway in one or the other direction, this is where things collapse.
No, for sure. That's I 100% agree. I think, even like you said, some people, students bringing in videos of technique they saw, their mind is in the right place, right? They're trying to absorb as much information as they can, and they're looking up technique, or they're staying invested in it in their time off the mats, and then they're trying to come in and learn. But sometimes it can be like information overload, right? You can be looking at so many different techniques, trying to do so many things, and nothing's really sticking, right? Sometimes you just have to pick something, and stick with it and follow through with it. You can't be like a jack of all trades and master of none, right? You gotta pick something, you gotta stick with it, you gotta follow through, see it through. And so sometimes it helps to put that phone down, right? Not look at any reels, not look at anybody doing stuff in competition that looks super impressive. Focus on what's in front of you. What do you need to get better at, right? Like, we can't all be moving like the Ritola brothers or the Take brothers. Sometimes they had to start with fundamentals too, and basics. And if you haven't mastered that, you shouldn't be trying to do, the backflip over somebody's guard and pass the way that they do. Like, they didn't learn that overnight, right? That's years of a lot of time on the mat, doing a lot of basic things and figuring out how their bodies move and work, right?
No, absolutely. And look, there's only 2 Ritola brothers, and there's billions of other people. And like, we look at the highlights, we don't look at the reality of it. But cool story came up to my mind. This actually happened recently in my academy. Guys were looking at one of the videos, and they asked me, it's like they couldn't see the angle was kind of crappy, and they didn't know what was happening. And they're like, we're trying to figure this out, how do you do this, and then I was trying to be funny. I was like, hold on, let me show you how I used to learn. So I went to the office. I got one of the old books, and the book is like 20 years old. It's like when I was blue belt, I think, or white belt, and the book has like 4 pictures, the images, on each page, and there's no text, there's just images, just photos, and I was like, look, this is how I used to learn. See this to this, Nobody told me how to get there. I just we had to figure it out. We sat there for hours and figured out how to get from one point to another.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys have it easy. Like, you just got to watch the video, and
Yeah.
but that kind of, in a reality, jokes aside, that really shows. I feel like the creativity, the mind stimulation really was taken away by a lot of those videos. Everything is handed to us in the palm of our hand on a phone or some kind of video format, and that troubleshooting, the figuring part out, is not as present. Would you agree with that part?
Absolutely. There's that actually reminds me of a book that I read, and it deals with that same particular issue. And the book is called Curious, and the author's name is Ian Leslie, and he basically talks about how that's part of that double-edged sword of advancement and technological advancement, is that now there's so much information that's readily available. That's a plus, but it has really killed the curiosity of a lot of the users, because you don't have to go to such great lengths to achieve the results you want or to figure things out. You can just go onto a search engine and type something in.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's good and bad, but one of the things that's bad about it is, like, a lot of achievement in human history can be attributed to curiosity, people wanting to figure things out that weren't readily known to them, right? And the lengths they had to go to get that knowledge caused a lot of achievements that have benefited us tremendously. So it's important to keep that in mind, that, like, with all this technological advancement, how readily available information is to you, that can be very beneficial, but it can also kill your curiosity. It kills your curiosity, and you're not thinking individually anymore for ways to obtain certain goals or results or whatever. It can cause you to become kind of stagnant. So, like you said, we used to have to pick up these books, from Salo Rivera or Sean, it's like
Old school.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the ones I can remember is, like, Salo and Shanji or whatever. Or Marcelo used to have some Andre Galvao.
Yeah.
And they were just pictures of these techniques and stuff. But again, to your point, like, at least it gave you a jumping off point, it gave you something to work on,
Mm-hmm.
and then to troubleshoot yourself in a brainstorm. I try to get a lot of my students to do that too, because it falls in line with what we were just saying from the curiosity standpoint, but also just adult learning principles in general. The way that adults learn is by having self-control and self-direction. It's not like the learning experiences of a child where they're just going to absorb any information that you throw at them, because they don't have any life experiences or reason to differentiate between what you're telling them to do. Adults, have those life experiences, have that knowledge that to make those differences, determination. So you have to give them some sort of self-control, some sort of self-direction. So if you're showing a technique, it shouldn't just be, hey, this is how it's done, this is how I want you to do it. There shouldn't be any deviation. It's like, hey, look, this is what the technique is rooted in conceptually, right? This is the goal. But have your partner give you different reactions. Try to troubleshoot those reactions. Recognize when they do something, what comes from that. What are they making weak as a result? Where can they be exploited? And then you get people thinking differently, using their own knowledge, their own attributes. I think that you see a lot of curiosity and a lot of growth.
Yeah, the experimentation part. Yeah. That's the most fun part, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go back to the
We've
books,
been at this for. I did not know that you are such a big reader. What's your favorite book? I'm completely obsessed with reading, so I read a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, man. I read a little bit of everything. So to be honest, if I could have my guilty pleasure, it's a lot. I read a lot of fiction. I love fiction because it lets me feel like I don't have to be like studying and taking notes and actually benefiting from it. I read a lot of like nonfiction and self-improvement books too, but sometimes you got to be in the right frame of mind for it, right? Because there's a lot of information that can be beneficial to you from it that you want to take away. You got to be in the right mindset. If you're not in the mindset to read it and really absorb it and study it, you're just kind of going in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But if I can just read my fiction books, it's great because I can just zone out, just enjoy it. If I was going to say like my favorite, I read a lot of like historical fiction from Stephen Pressfield. So, he did a bunch of books around like the time of like the Roman Empire and a lot of like the Spartan stuff. So he wrote Gates of Fire, which is about the Battle of Thermopylae, basically like what the movie 300 was based off of, with the 300 Spartans.
Mm-hmm.
So he writes a lot of historical fiction. So, you're learning, you're benefiting from it. It's very informative, but it's also, it's happening, it's a story.
Very cool. Very cool. I am nonfiction guy. I can't. My head goes off to you. I cannot read fiction. I fall asleep. I can't. My attention.
You're missing out.
Probably. I'll look that up. But maybe this is gonna catch my eye.
To each their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the best part about life, right? Like, we are individual humans and we do what we love, and as long as we continue getting better, chipping away, and continue, just be a good person. I continue saying to everybody, at least in my kingdom, just do a good job. That's all really matters. Just be a good person, do a good job.
I agree.
Dylan, I really, like, we've been at it for an hour and 15 minutes, so I do want to be respectful of your time and start wrapping this up. But before we finish this, you do a lot. And if anybody wants to connect with you directly, whether on your professional level or jiu-jitsu or even, books, whatever people, whenever people want to connect, where can you be found? Where are you connected to?
Yep. The easiest way to reach me is on my personal Instagram, which is Royce, ROYCE, Dylan, DYLAN. So it's just at Royce Dylan, my last name and then my first name. But that's what I check the most as far as my DMs. So, people that are in the law enforcement profession or that are just in the jiu-jitsu profession or both, I always encourage people to reach out to me if they have questions about like balancing the two or how to improve in one or the other, competition questions, whatever. I encourage people to reach out. I'm always receptive to questions, feedback, whatever. So if people want to get a hold of me, that's the way.
Awesome. And as always, guys, I'm going to put all the links in the description of this episode. So if you guys want to connect with Dylan and ask him questions, use him as a resource. What a phenomenal resource he is. Feel free to do it. I mean, that's what all these conversations are all about, and all about building the network and connecting with each other. Mm-hmm. Dylan, thanks for being here. Thanks for being vulnerable and really opening up about your past, about your day number one. And we didn't get to so much, and yet this conversation flew by so fast. So I do appreciate you sharing all of that, because I think we are so private these days, and stories like this really motivate many others. And as thousands listens to it, it will be, it could change somebody's life. We never know. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. I hope it helps somebody, and it means a lot that you reached out and consider me interesting and beneficial enough to have on. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I just hope that somebody can benefit from it, somebody can learn from it, and hopefully I'll be on again. We'll get through the next hour and 15 of conversation. We'll have a great time again, but it's been a blast. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Let's wrap for after today. And as always, I'll be sitting on the sidelines and watching as you continue doing amazing things. Let's wrap it up.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.